The hum of the Tempest's engines filled the quiet of the command deck, a familiar background noise that always calmed Commander Nathan Briggs. But today, it barely registered. His attention was fixed on the flickering holographic screen in front of him, displaying the Lantieri's planet, a world ravaged by war and now on the verge of collapse. Above him, a crackling voice cut through the silence. "Commander, we're picking up a distress signal," Lieutenant Sarah Miles reported, her tone neutral, though Briggs caught the edge of concern beneath her words. She tapped a few keys, amplifying the weak transmission. "It's coming from the Lantieri system. They're asking for immediate assistance." Briggs glanced at the screen, his eyes narrowing as the full weight of the situation settled on his shoulders. The Lantieri had been abandoned by the Galactic Council weeks ago, deemed unworthy of further aid. Their planet was under siege by a cosmic force known only as the Void Storm, a creeping, unstoppable phenomenon that had already swallowed several nearby systems. "They're a lost cause," Miles continued, her voice softening as she read the grim details. "No one else is responding." Briggs leaned back in his chair, considering his options. The Council had been clear: no involvement. The Lantieri weren't a strategic asset, and risking a human ship in their defense would be seen as a foolish gamble. But something gnawed at him. He couldn't just stand by and watch an entire race be erased from existence. His decision was made before he even spoke. Set a course for the Lantieri homeworld. Miles turned to him, eyes wide. "Commander, our orders." "Orders be damned," Briggs interrupted, his voice firm but controlled. "We don't abandon people just because it's convenient. If no one else will help them, we will." A silence fell over the bridge. Miles didn't respond immediately, but her jaw tightened in a way that told Briggs she wasn't entirely on board. Still, she turned back to her console and initiated the course correction. As the ship shifted direction, Briggs stood and approached the large viewport at the front of the deck. Beyond the shimmering energy field, the vast expanse of space stretched out before them, cold and indifferent. "They'll call us fools for this," Miles muttered, stepping beside him. Her eyes scanned the stars, as if searching for an answer to her unspoken fears. "Maybe," Briggs replied quietly, his gaze steady. "But I'd rather be a fool who tried than a coward who stood by and did nothing." Miles said nothing, but her silence was enough. She would follow him, as she always did, even when the path ahead was dangerous. Together, they watched as the Lantieri planet loomed closer on the screen, its once vibrant cities now darkened under the shadow of the Void Storm. "Incoming message from command," an officer called out. Briggs turned, already knowing what was coming. The hologram blinked to life, revealing Admiral Holt's stern face. "Commander Briggs, you are ordered to disengage and return to base immediately. The Lantieri situation is unsalvageable. This mission is a waste of resources." Briggs met the Admiral's gaze, his jaw tightening. "I understand the orders, sir. But I believe we can still make a difference. If we don't intervene, they'll be wiped out." "The Council has made its decision," Holt replied sharply. "I expect you to follow your orders." Briggs clenched his fists behind his back, his mind racing. The lives of an entire race hung in the balance. Could he really turn back now, knowing he could have done something? The line went dead, the Admiral's face disappearing into the void. He exhaled slowly, his decision final. "We're going in." The tension on the bridge was palpable, but no one objected. They all knew what was at stake now. "Prepare for planetfall," Briggs ordered. "And let's hope we're not too late." The tempest broke through the atmosphere of the Lantieri homeworld, the once blue skies now thick with swirling clouds of ash and debris. Below them, the surface was a wasteland of crumbled cities and scorched plains. Lieutenant Sarah Miles studied the readouts, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Surface conditions are worse than expected," she said, glancing at Commander Briggs. "Radiation spikes from the Void Storm are making it difficult to get accurate readings, but it's bad down there." Briggs nodded grimly, his gaze fixed on the burning horizon. "We'll need to move quickly. Prepare a landing team. I'll be joining you." Miles hesitated, her hand hovering over the console. "Are you sure that's wise, sir? If it's a trap, we deal with it." We're here to help, and that means I'll be on the ground with you." His tone brooked no argument, though there was a flicker of something deeper in his eyes. A quiet resolve, perhaps, or the weight of guilt for a mission that wasn't sanctioned. "Understood," Miles replied, though she didn't sound fully convinced. Minutes later, the landing craft descended through the haze, its engines whining as it fought against the planet's turbulent atmosphere. Inside the cramped cabin, Briggs scanned his team, seasoned soldiers and medics, each wearing the same hard expression. They knew the risks. No one spoke as the ship shook from the winds outside. As they touched down in the ruins of what had once been a Lantiri city, Briggs felt a strange stillness in the air. The void storm loomed on the horizon like a living thing, its dark tendrils reaching out hungrily. He could feel the static crackling in the air, a constant reminder of the ticking clock. Miles activated her visor, scanning for signs of life. "I've got faint readings to the east. Could be survivors, but it's hard to tell with all the interference." "Let's move," Briggs ordered, his voice steady despite the eerie silence surrounding them. The team fanned out, weapons at the ready, though there was no sign of an immediate threat. As they made their way through the wreckage, Briggs couldn't help but notice the sheer scale of destruction. Buildings reduced to twisted metal and rubble. The ground beneath their boots scorched black. A faint wind carried the smell of burning, mixed with something faintly sweet and rotten. The Lantiri had been a peaceful race, and now they were fighting for survival in the shadow of a cataclysm no one fully understood. "Over here," a soldier called from up ahead, his voice urgent. Briggs and Miles rushed forward, finding a cluster of Lantiri huddled beneath a collapsed structure. Their large, insect-like eyes blinked slowly, their pale skin bruised and dirted from the fallout. "Humans," one of the survivors murmured, their voice weak but filled with astonishment. You came." Briggs knelt beside the alien, offering a canteen of water. "We heard your distress call. We're here to help." Another Lantiri, an elder by the look of the ornate, tattered robes clinging to their skeletal frame, shook their heads slowly. "It's too late, the storm. It devours everything. You should not have come." Miles glanced at Briggs, her expression tense. "We need to get them out of here before the storm reaches us." Before Briggs could respond, the ground trembled violently. Dust and debris rained down from above, and the sky darkened further as the void storm's edge crept closer, its dark mass swirling with malevolent intent. "We don't have much time," Briggs said, rising to his feet. "Get them back to the ship.
Now."
As the team worked to lift the injured Lantiri, Briggs couldn't shake the elder's words. It wasn't just despair he'd heard, it was something more. A warning. "Commander!" Miles' shout pulled him from his thoughts. He looked up just in time to see the storm surge forward, a wall of shadow and lightning racing toward them. They were out of time. "Fall back," Briggs yelled, his heart pounding in his chest. They had minutes, maybe seconds, before the void storm engulfed them all. The Tempest's alarms blared as the void storm surged closer, a swirling vortex of chaos blotting out the sky. Commander Briggs ran toward the landing craft, his breath coming in sharp bursts. Around him, soldiers hurried to get the Lantiri refugees aboard. But they were moving too slowly. He could feel it, the creeping chill of the storm at his back, as though it was reaching out to swallow them whole. "Get them on board now," Briggs barked, his voice barely cutting through the roar of wind and distant thunder. The ground trembled again, each quake more violent than the last. "We don't have time." Lieutenant Sarah Miles was already at the craft's ramp, directing the soldiers and medics. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she helped an injured Lantiri elder onto a stretcher. The elder, frail and trembling, grasped her arm with a weak but insistent grip. "You must leave before the storm reaches its full power," the elder rasped, their voice strained. "There's something inside it, something ancient. It consumes everything." Miles met Briggs' eyes over the elder's shoulder. Her face was set in grim determination, but the fear was there too, flickering beneath her usual calm exterior. "Commander, we need to go." Briggs scanned the area one last time, ensuring no one was left behind. His team had already secured most of the Lantiri, but time was running out. A low, ominous rumble rolled across the landscape, and the storm's edge, a wall of writhing darkness, was now less than a mile away. "Everyone aboard," Briggs shouted. He sprinted up the ramp, glancing over his shoulder as the last of his soldiers clambered into the craft. The wind howled, ripping debris from the ground and sending it spiraling into the churning sky. The ramp slammed shut, sealing them inside just as the first tendrils of the void storm licked the hull. The craft shuddered violently as it lifted off, rising into the toxic, storm-filled atmosphere. Briggs braced himself against the wall, steadying his breathing as the ship rattled under the relentless assault of the storm's winds. "Hold on," Miles shouted from the cockpit. Her hands gripped the controls tightly, her knuckles white as she fought to keep the craft stable. Outside, the storm raged, lightning cracking through the darkness like jagged, electric veins. Briggs pulled himself forward, watching the storm's terrifying approach through the viewport. It wasn't just a weather phenomenon, it was something far worse. The swirling clouds were alive, pulsating with dark energy, and within them, something massive shifted, as though the storm was a cocoon for a much greater terror. "What in hell is that?" one of the soldiers muttered, his voice low with dread as he stared into the blackness. His words echoed the unspoken fear rising in everyone's chest. "I don't know," Briggs answered, but his voice was tight. "But we're getting out of here before we find out." Suddenly, the ship jolted, and the controls sparked wildly. Miles cursed under her breath, yanking at the thrusters. "The storm's messing with our systems. We're losing altitude, fast." Briggs grabbed the comms, his voice sharp. "All hands, brace for impact." The ship plummeted, spinning as the void storm's tendrils lashed at its sides. For a moment, everything was chaos. Sparks flew, metal groaned, and the force of the descent pressed them hard into their seats. The storm closed in, wrapping them in its suffocating embrace. For a second, Briggs thought they were lost, swallowed by the endless void. Then, as suddenly as it began, the turbulence eased. The ship lurched forward, breaking free from the storm's grip. Outside, the horizon cleared, revealing the sprawling debris field of an orbital junkyard just beyond the planet's edge. "We're clear," Miles gasped, her voice trembling with relief. She pulled the ship into a shaky orbit, her fingers still white-knuckled on the controls. Briggs exhaled slowly, wiping the sweat from his brow. They had escaped, but only barely. As the storm receded behind them, a new dread settled in his gut. Something ancient, something far more dangerous than the void storm itself, lurked within its depths. And it wasn't done with them yet. The Tempest hung in orbit, the vast expanse of space eerily calm compared to the raging void storm below. Inside, the tension was palpable. Commander Briggs paced in the cramped control room, the hum of the ship's systems doing little to ease his unease. The void storm had retreated, but the thing lurking within it hadn't. Lieutenant Miles, still seated at the controls, broke the silence. "We've stabilized, but whatever that thing was, it's still down there. We're not safe yet." Briggs ran a hand through his short, sweat-dampened hair. His mind raced. The Lanteri were safe, for now, but something far worse was unfolding. "How long before the storm reaches the planet's core?" he asked, his voice low and steady. Miles glanced at the scanner, her brow furrowed. "Not long. It's accelerating, and once it hits, it'll devour everything." "That storm isn't just weather, Commander, it's a weapon." Briggs turned sharply. "A weapon?" Miles nodded. "I've been monitoring its pattern. It's controlled, directed. And whatever's inside, it is guiding it toward total planetary annihilation." Briggs clenched his jaw. The Lanteri hadn't stood a chance, and now, it seemed the humans had walked right into the same trap. His fists tightened at his sides as the weight of the situation settled over him. There had to be something they could do. The comms crackled to life. It was Sergeant Kane, still attending to the refugees in the medical bay. "Commander, we've got a situation down here. The Lanteri Elder, they're saying something about the storm's origin. You need to hear this." Briggs exchanged a glance with Miles before hurrying down to the medical bay. When he arrived, the air was thick with urgency. The Elder, propped up on a bed, was breathing shallowly, their pale eyes wide with a mix of fear and knowledge. Briggs knelt beside them. "What is it? What do you know about the storm?" The elder's voice was weak, but their words were clear. The storm, it was not always like this. It was a shield, a protector, but something corrupted it, something ancient. The Voidborn. The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy with dread. Voidborns? Briggs pressed, his heart pounding. They are, beyond your understanding, a race as old as time itself. They dwell in the darkest reaches of the universe. The storm is their prison, but now they are breaking free. And they will not stop until all life is extinguished. Briggs' blood ran cold. An ancient race, hidden within the storm, with the power to annihilate entire worlds. If they didn't act soon, the Lantiri homeworld would be just the beginning. "What can we do?" he asked, desperation creeping into his voice. The elder's hand trembled as they reached for Briggs. "There is only one way. The heart of the storm. You must destroy it before they fully awaken." Briggs stood, his mind racing. Destroy the heart of the storm? The idea seemed impossible, but they had no choice. He had to try. Back in the control room, Briggs relayed the plan to Miles. Her expression was one of disbelief, but she nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "We'll have to go deep into the storm to reach the core. The ship might not make it." "I know," Briggs said, steeling himself. "But if we don't stop it, the storm will wipe out this entire sector." The Tempest's engines roared to life as the ship angled downward, plunging back toward the swirling maelstrom. The crew braced themselves as the violent winds buffeted the hull. Lightning crackled all around them, and the ship groaned under the strain. "Visual on the core," Miles said through gritted teeth, her hands steady on the controls. "It's massive." Ahead, through the chaos, Briggs could see it, a pulsating, dark mass at the center of the storm. It throbbed with malevolent energy, a heart of darkness beating with ancient life. "Prepare to fire," Briggs ordered. His hands clenched the console as the ship drew closer, the Voidborn's presence pressing in on them like a crushing weight. The targeting system locked onto the core, and Miles' fingers hovered over the trigger. "Ready, Commander." Briggs took a deep breath. This was it. Fire. The ship's cannons unleashed a barrage of energy, streaking toward the storm's heart. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a deafening explosion rocked the sky. The core imploded, sending shockwaves through the storm. The darkness recoiled, shrinking as the Voidborn's prison closed once again. As the storm began to dissipate, Briggs exhaled, relief flooding his chest. They had done it. The Lantiri were saved, and the Voidborn were once again sealed away.